Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. Every morning, he'd kiss me goodbye, telling me he'd be stuck in meetings all day. I always trusted him, believing his words. It was the routine, him leaving for work, me going about my day. But something felt off recently. He was home more often, still dressing in work clothes, yet I never saw him leaving the office early. I tried to brush it off. Everyone has slow weeks, right? But deep down, a small voice nagged at me, urging me to find out the truth. What was really going on with him? At first, I convinced myself it was just stress. Maybe work was overwhelming, or maybe he needed a break. But then, I noticed more signs. He was leaving later, coming home earlier, and his phone was always on silent. I tried not to let it bother me, but the changes in his routine felt too noticeable. I started asking questions, but he'd brush me off with vague answers. Busy day, he'd say. But my gut was screaming at me. Something was off, and I had to know what it was. I tried calling him during the day to check in, but every time, it went straight to voicemail. He'd return my calls later, saying he was in back-to-back meetings or working on a deadline. I started to get suspicious. Why would he never answer his phone when he was supposedly at work? He'd always been responsive before. Why the sudden silence? A sinking feeling in my chest grew stronger each time I saw his missed calls or heard his excuses. Something wasn't adding up. One afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to follow him. It was a decision that felt both strange and necessary. I watched as he kissed me goodbye with his usual smile, told me he'd be home late, then left. Instead of heading to his usual commute, I secretly followed him. My heart pounded in my chest as he walked down the street. He didn't go toward the office, but instead took a detour toward a coffee shop. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was he lying to me? I stood hidden around the corner, watching him enter the coffee shop and sit down with a book. No work, no laptop, nothing that resembled his usual office hours. He sipped his coffee as if he had all the time in the world. My mind raced. This wasn't what I expected at all. The man who claimed to be working nonstop was sitting in a cafe, completely at ease, like he had no responsibilities. I felt betrayed, confused, and utterly alone in that moment. What was he hiding from me? I stayed in the shadows for a while, watching him scroll through his phone and sip his coffee. The longer I watched, the more questions I had. Why was he pretending to go to work every day? He didn't look stressed or overwhelmed. He looked like he had all the time in the world. The person he was showing me at home didn't match the person I was seeing now. It was a lie. But how deep did it go? Was it just a few harmless days off, or was there something more to it? For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a lie. Every morning, he kissed me goodbye and headed out, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I decided to follow him again. This time, I trailed him as he walked to a park, sat on a bench, and stared at his phone for hours. No work calls, no emails, just him sitting there, lost in his own world. I felt my heart drop. This wasn't a simple mistake. He was pretending, and I had to figure out why. Days passed, and I couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion. It was like a weight on my chest, suffocating me. I kept following him, watching him spend hours in different parks and cafes, never going to his office. He was lying to me, and I didn't know how to confront him without sounding crazy. What if I was just being paranoid? What if there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this? But everything in me screamed that I was right. He was hiding something, and I needed to know what. One evening, I decided to confront him. I couldn't take the secrecy anymore. "Where have you really been going every day?" I asked, trying to stay calm. His face paled and he stuttered, "I've been working. You know how busy things have been." But I didn't believe him. Not anymore. "I know you're lying," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. He looked at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "It's nothing, really. Just needed some space." His eyes avoided mine. Something was terribly wrong. I pressed harder. "Why would you need space from me? Why lie about your job?" He went quiet, and I could see the guilt in his eyes. "I didn't know how to tell you," he finally confessed. "I lost my job months ago. I didn't want to disappoint you." My heart shattered in that moment. He'd been pretending to go to work, lying to me every single day. I felt like a fool. The man I loved, the man I trusted, had been living a double life. And all this time, I had no idea. I was in shock. The reality of his words hit me like a tidal wave. He had been pretending for months. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He seemed lost in his own world, clearly struggling with the truth. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want you to look at me like this. His voice cracked. I couldn't look at him. The trust one had in him, the life we built. It all seemed like a lie. The silence between us was suffocating. I could feel the weight of the lie hanging in the air. How could you hide something like that? I demanded, but he didn't answer. He just stared at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. He had lied about something so significant, something that impacted both of us. All these months of pretending. Every time he left the house, he was living a lie, and I had been none the wiser. I didn't want to burden you with this, he said softly, almost as if trying to justify his actions. I thought I could handle it on my own. But I've been a coward. His words stung, but I wanted to know more. Why couldn't he tell me? How could you think lying to me would help? I would have supported you, I said, barely able to hold back tears. He finally looked up, guilt and regret in his eyes. I didn't want to admit I'd failed. I didn't want to admit I wasn't enough. I wanted to scream, to throw something at him, but I just stood there, trying to process the shock. What else aren't you telling me? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. He hesitated, then whispered, there's more. I wasn't just hiding my job. I've been meeting someone. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Who? I demanded. He looked away. It's complicated, but I need you to understand. I never meant for it to get this far. I didn't know what to think anymore. Who is she? I asked again, the anger rising in my chest. I don't want to hear excuses. His face turned pale as he finally admitted, she's someone I met a while ago. An old friend. I was speechless. Was this just an affair? Was I competing with some woman from his past? What's been going on between you two? I asked, my heart racing. Nothing physical, he said quickly. But I've been talking to her about everything, and I think I needed someone to talk to. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. I felt dizzy, my vision blurring as I tried to process his words. You've been talking to her about everything? While you've been lying to me. I couldn't keep the tears from falling now. He looked like he wanted to comfort me, but how could he? He had already broken me. I know it's wrong. I never meant to hurt you. I swear. But his words felt empty, hollow. How could I believe anything he said anymore? My trust was shattered, beyond repair. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. All these months of lies, and now he was asking me to forgive him? You thought you could fix this on your own? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. How? By lying to me? By pretending everything was fine when it wasn't? He stood there, looking guilty, but I wasn't sure that guilt was enough. I had no idea who this person was standing in front of me anymore. The man I married felt like a stranger. I couldn't just pretend it was all okay. I needed answers, clarity. I hired a private investigator to look into his activities. I needed to know the full truth. It wasn't just about him lying about his job anymore. It was about everything. The woman he was meeting, his secret life, the lies that had been building up for so long. I didn't care if it meant digging up painful truths. I had to know what I was dealing with. The investigator's report would change everything. The report came back with more information than I expected. He had been meeting her regularly, not just casually, but intimately. The investigator had followed him to a fancy restaurant where they'd shared dinner and spent hours talking. The worst part? They had been in touch even when he was at home, texting, calling. I felt sick to my stomach. The man I thought was working had been building a life outside of me. And worse, he had been doing it with someone else. I couldn't keep the tears from flowing as I read the investigator's report. He had been hiding his relationship with this woman, lying to me about everything. I called him out on it. I know about her, I said, my voice cold with anger. He froze. I can explain, he said quickly, but his words were hollow now. Explain? You've been lying to me for months, and now you want to explain. I was done listening to him. The betrayal was too much. I felt like my world was collapsing, and I didn't know how to survive this. He tried to justify his actions, saying he never meant for it to go this far. It was just someone to talk to, he pleaded. But it sounded empty. You think I'm stupid? I can see what this was, I snapped, my voice shaking with anger. You've been lying to me for months. You've been spending time with her, not working, all while telling me you were at the office. The more he spoke, the more his excuses felt like betrayal. I didn't know who he was anymore, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She doesn't mean anything, he said softly. I never cheated on you. I swear. But the damage was done. His words felt like hollow promises, and I couldn't bring myself to believe him anymore. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said quietly. How can I? You've been living a lie for months. He tried to reach out, but I stepped back, too hurt to let him touch me. The trust we had was gone. And without trust, there was nothing left between us. Please, he begged. Let's work through this. I'll do anything to fix it. But I wasn't sure I wanted him to fix it. I wasn't sure I even wanted him anymore. His lies had shattered something in me, and I didn't know if I could put the pieces back together. I needed space, time to think, to process everything he had done. I can't do this right now, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to be alone. I walked away, leaving him standing there, with nothing but his apologies. Days passed, and I stayed in a constant state of confusion. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I didn't know how to handle the betrayal. I started to question everything. Was any of it real? The love, the memories, the life we'd shared? Had it all been a lie? I found myself unable to sleep, constantly replaying the moments we'd had, trying to figure out when everything went wrong. He was still calling, still pleading for forgiveness, but I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. I met with the woman he had been seeing. It felt like I was in a bad dream, like everything had flipped upside down. She was kind, and she had no idea I existed. She seemed genuine, but what did that matter now? She didn't owe me anything. I asked her about him, and she seemed shocked when I told her the truth. I had no idea he was married, she said, looking guilty. I didn't know. He told me he was single. The more I heard, the more it confirmed my worst fears. He had been living two separate lives. The more I learned about their interactions, the more disgusted I felt. He had been talking to her about his life, his dreams, his frustrations, while I had been completely shut out. How could he open up to someone else and not to me? I felt worthless. She didn't deserve to be in the middle of this. I didn't blame her, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my husband had used her as a crutch while betraying me. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the truth. I tried to speak to him again, but I couldn't hold back the tears. How could you do this to me? I asked, my voice breaking. You told me you loved me, and you made a fool of me. How could I ever trust you again? He didn't have answers that could fix it, and that made it worse. I'm so sorry, he kept saying, but sorry wasn't enough. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you've caused, I snapped, wiping my eyes. I couldn't forgive him yet. I needed time. I needed to figure out what to do next. I thought about leaving, about starting fresh without him. The idea seemed both terrifying and liberating, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk away from everything we had built. Was this one mistake worth throwing it all away? Could I forgive him and rebuild? Or was this the end of the road for us? I wasn't sure. I only knew that I couldn't stay in this fog of confusion forever. I needed clarity, and I needed him to show me that he was truly sorry. He kept coming to me with apologies, each one sounding more desperate than the last. I'll change. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes. But I wasn't sure I could believe him. His promises had no weight anymore. They were just words, words I had heard so many times before. You've already shown me who you are, I said quietly, and I don't know if I can trust you again. His face crumpled as I said those words, but they were the truth. I had to be strong. I couldn't go back to the person who lied to me. I distanced myself from him, not sure if I was ready to let go or try to salvage our relationship. I spent more time with my friends, people who didn't lie to me, who loved me unconditionally. It felt good to be surrounded by people who cared about me, who made me feel valued. I began to realize that I had been putting so much of my energy into trying to fix someone else that I had neglected myself. It was time to focus on me. For once, I deserved that. The days turned into weeks, and still, he tried to reach me. He showed up at my work, sent me flowers, and left me notes filled with apologies. At first, I had hoped these gestures would soften the anger inside me, but they only served as a reminder of how deep his lies ran. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said one day, the weight of the decision settling in. He looked at me, eyes pleading, but the truth was, I had no idea if I could move past this betrayal. The hardest part wasn't even the lies. It was the way he made me question everything. Had I been blind? How had I not seen the signs? I had been so focused on trusting him that I ignored my own instincts. The guilt I felt for not noticing sooner weighed heavily on me. What if I had known? What if I had acted differently? I couldn't help but replay those months, wondering if things would have turned out differently. But the truth was, we couldn't go back. One night, I found myself alone in the house, just thinking. He had finally stopped calling. I guess he had taken the hint that I needed space. The silence was both calming and suffocating. It gave me time to reflect on everything: the life we had built, the love I once thought was real, and the trust one had placed in him. I realized that I had to stop letting his actions dictate my emotions. I had to take control, but I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. I want to see a therapist to help me sort through my emotions. It wasn't just about him anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to please everyone around me, my family, my friends, my husband, that I had lost sight of myself. I wasn't sure who I was without him, without his lies. The therapist helped me understand that it wasn't my fault. I didn't cause his actions. But accepting that truth didn't make the pain go away. I still had a long way to go before I could heal. It was a Saturday when he showed up at my door again, this time with a letter. "I've been thinking about everything we've been through," he said, his voice shaking. "And I realized how much I've hurt you. I can't change the past, but I can be better. If you'll give me one more chance, I promise to show you who I truly am." I looked at him for a long moment, my heart torn. His words sounded sincere, but could I really trust him again? Would I ever be able to? I took a long walk that day, trying to clear my mind. My thoughts were a whirlwind. I still loved him in some way, but the damage was so deep. Could love really heal all wounds? Or would it always be tainted by his lies? I tried to picture a future with him, but every scenario felt overshadowed by the betrayal. I had to decide if I was willing to risk my heart again, or if I needed to let go for good. There was no easy answer, no right choice. Only uncertainty. I went to the park that afternoon, sitting on the same bench where I had first followed him months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. This had all started with a simple suspicion, and now here I was, questioning everything. The man I thought I knew had been hiding in plain sight, living a life without me. I thought back to the conversations we'd had, the moments that seemed so real. Had it all been an illusion? I wasn't sure what was real anymore, my past or my future. When I got home, he was still there, waiting patiently. "I've thought a lot about what you said," I told him, sitting down across from him, "and I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. I need time to heal, time to figure out who I am without you." He nodded, understanding. "I'll give you whatever time you need. Just know that I'm here and I'll wait." It was the most genuine thing he'd said in weeks. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted him waiting. I wasn't sure what I wanted at all. Weeks passed, and I started to feel a sense of independence that I hadn't felt in a long time. I focused more on my own goals, my own happiness. Slowly, I started to remember who I was before all of this happened. I wasn't just his wife. I was me, a person with dreams, desires, and a life of her own. The more I embraced this new version of myself, the more I realized that I didn't need him to define me. I had to make peace with my past before moving forward. But even with my newfound independence, the memories of our life together still haunted me. I couldn't escape the good times we'd shared, the love we'd once had. I found myself missing the version of him that hadn't lied. The man I had loved so deeply felt like a ghost. Was it possible to let go of the memories but still hold on to the love? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his betrayal. I made the decision to take a trip on my own. I needed to get away, to clear my head. No distractions, no obligations. I went to a small coastal town where I could walk by the ocean, feel the sand between my toes, and breathe deeply without the weight of everything on my shoulders. The stillness gave me clarity. I realized how much I had been suffocating in my own life, trying to keep everything intact, trying to fix something that might never be fixed. When I returned home, the house felt different. It was quieter. The memories of our life together were still there, but I felt stronger. I had found peace in the solitude. I sat down with him that evening. "I've been thinking a lot," I said quietly, "and I don't know what the future holds, but I can't keep living in this limbo." He listened intently, his face unreadable. "I need to focus on myself first, before I even think about us," I continued. "I need to heal." He didn't argue. He simply nodded, his eyes full of pain and regret. "I understand," he said softly. "I'll give you all the space you need. Just know that I'm here, and I want to make things right." His words were sincere, but I wasn't sure if they were enough anymore. I had spent so much of my life trying to fix things for him, for us. Now, it was time to focus on fixing me. I didn't owe him anything, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Days turned into weeks again, and I continued on my path of self-discovery. I began to do things I had forgotten I loved: painting, reading, even taking long walks without any destination. The more I took care of myself, the more I realized how much I had neglected my own happiness. I wasn't sure if this was a temporary escape or a permanent change, but I knew that I wasn't the same person I had been before I found out about his lies. I was stronger now, more independent. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the grief of what had happened hit me like a wave. I missed the person I thought I had married. I missed the dreams we had shared. But every time I felt that pain, I reminded myself that it wasn't my fault. I didn't deserve to carry the weight of his lies. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. Slowly, I began to let go. The process was painful, but it was necessary. One afternoon, I received a letter from him. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness, nor was it an apology. It was a reflection of everything we had gone through together. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he wrote. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I've learned so much from my mistakes. I just hope that one day, you can look at me and see the man I want to be, not the man I was." I put the letter down, tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't the words themselves that made me emotional, but the realization that I was truly letting go. The life we had built was no longer my reality. I couldn't keep living in the past, replaying the good times, because the good was tainted by the lies. He had shown me who he was, and I had to accept that. But the person I had become, stronger, independent, and more self-aware, was someone I couldn't lose sight of. I didn't know if I would ever forgive him completely. Forgiveness wasn't something that could be rushed. It was a process, one I was still going through. But I was beginning to understand that forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. I couldn't keep holding on to the anger and resentment. I needed to free myself from the burden of his betrayal. The more I let go, the lighter I felt. I still wasn't sure where our relationship would go, but I knew I had to find peace within myself first. I reached out to him a few weeks later, not because I had all the answers, but because I had finally accepted the truth. "I'm not ready to say we're okay," I told him when we met, "but I'm learning to heal. I'm learning to forgive myself for letting this happen." He nodded, understanding. "I don't expect anything from you right now," he said quietly. "I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you need." In the end, I realized that the journey I had been on wasn't just about him. It was about me. I had learned to stand on my own, to rebuild my own sense of self-worth, and to let go of the past. Whether or not we found our way back to each other didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had found peace, and that was something no one could take away from me. As I moved forward, I did so with my head held high, knowing that I had come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.